The cameras had barely started rolling when chaos erupted on set. And what should have been another ordinary day of filming turned into one of the most jaw-dropping moments reality TV has ever witnessed. The tension was thick in the air, the kind that clings to you and makes your heart race before a single word is even spoken. Fans who thought they had seen every kind of drama from this cast were left reeling as Kirk, usually known for keeping his cool under the spotlight, completely lost control in a way nobody expected. It wasn't a shouting match or a cold exchange of shade, it was physical, raw, and shocking. Mendeecees had stepped just a little too far into family matters that didn't concern him, and Kirk made sure to let everyone know the boundary had been crossed. The sound of that slap echoed across the set like a gunshot, and in that split second, jaws dropped, gasps filled the room, and the entire production froze. The crew didn't know whether to keep filming or intervene. The cast members were either clutching their pearls or holding their breath, and fans at home who would later catch wind of this behind-the-scenes chaos couldn't believe it was real. What could have possibly pushed Kirk to the breaking point? What words did Mendeecees throw out that crossed a line so deeply that the usually restrained Kirk snapped in front of the cameras, the producers, and his family? Some say it was about loyalty. Others whisper it was about secrets being aired that were never meant to leave the household. One thing is certain. This wasn't a minor spat or a playful scuffle. This was personal. This was betrayal meeting pride, frustration colliding with years of bottled-up tension. And when Kirk's voice thundered through the room, "Stay out of my family business," every soul present knew they had just witnessed a line drawn in fire. But here's the real question. Was this the moment that tore the family apart forever, or will it force them to confront the truths they've been burying for years? Stay with us, because the drama only escalates from here. The silence after Kirk's hand connected with Mendeecees' face was heavier than the slap itself. Like every single person on set had just witnessed a moment that would change the entire course of the season. The crew froze, cameras kept rolling in disbelief, and the cast stood in stunned silence as Kirk's voice thundered again, echoing with a fury that made everyone's chest tighten. "Stay out of my family business." Mendeecees staggered back a step, his hand instinctively flying to his cheek, eyes wide. Not from the pain of the slap, but from the humiliation of it happening in front of everyone. His jaw clenched, his pride burning hotter than the sting across his skin. But for a few seconds he couldn't even find words. Rashida's face turned pale, her hands shaking as she whispered under her breath, "Oh my God, Kirk, what did you just do?" She had seen Kirk angry before, had heard his raised voice in arguments, and had endured his stubborn ways. But this was something else. A level of rage that felt explosive, destructive, and out of control. Yandi, who had been sitting just a few feet away, shot up from her chair and rushed forward, her voice sharp and panicked. "Kirk, are you crazy? You can't put your hands on him like that." But Kirk wasn't listening to anyone. His chest rose and fell with the kind of adrenaline that doesn't go away easily, his eyes blazing as he pointed at Mendeecees. "You crossed a line. You don't know what's going on in my household. You don't get to open your mouth about my wife, about my kids, about anything that has to do with me." His voice cracked at the end, not from weakness but from how deeply personal the wound felt. Mendeecees finally found his words, his voice low but filled with venom. "You think you're the only one with a family? You think you're the only one trying to protect what's his? Don't you dare disrespect me like that again, Kirk. Don't ever raise your hand at me again." The set was so tense it felt like the air could shatter into glass at any moment. Crew members exchanged looks, some whispering about whether to call security, others hesitant because they knew this kind of raw drama was exactly what producers craved. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of rage, every bead of sweat, every shaky breath. Fans would never forgive them if they missed this. Rashida finally stepped forward, her voice trembling as she tried to wedge herself between the two men. "Enough, both of you. This has gone too far. Mendeecees, just walk away. Kirk, you need to calm down." But Kirk wasn't backing down. "Not yet. Walk away. After he came at me. After he disrespected me on my own set." His words came out like fire, and for a split second it looked like he might lunge forward again. Rashida pressed her hands against his chest, trying to hold him back, her eyes brimming with tears, not because she was afraid of what Kirk might do to Mendeecees, but because she could already see how this moment would spiral, how the headlines would tear them apart, how the fans would dissect every second of the clip and paint Kirk as a villain. "Please," she whispered to him, her voice breaking, "don't do this. Don't let them see you like this." The rest of the cast was caught in a storm of divided loyalties. Some whispered that Kirk was right to defend his family, that Mendeecees had no business dragging their personal issues into the open. Others shook their heads, muttering that violence had no excuse, that Kirk had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Yandy stood firmly at Mendeecees' side, her voice rising over the chaos. He was just trying to help. To look out for you when you can't even see what's happening right in front of your face. You don't get to silence him with your hands. Kirk's eyes snapped to her, his voice bitter. Help? You call that help? Undermining me? Questioning me? That's not help. That's stirring the pot. That's disrespect. Mendeecees' voice grew louder, steadier now as his pride fought back. You don't scare me, Kirk. You think you can intimidate me in front of everybody. You think because you're standing here with your chest puffed out that I'm going to back down. Nah, that's not me. His words sparked another round of gasps from the crew. And for a heartbeat the entire room seemed to hold its breath again, bracing for a second explosion. Rashida's tears finally broke free, streaming down her face as she cried out, "Please, both of you, stop. This isn't what we're here for. This isn't what the show is supposed to be." But deep down, everyone knew this was exactly what the show thrived on: the chaos. The betrayal, the explosive moments that blurred the line between reality and spectacle. Producers on the sidelines whispered hurriedly into their headsets, debating whether to cut the scene or let it play, their eyes wide with the recognition that they had just captured television gold. Fans watching later would never forget the look on Kirk's face in that moment. It wasn't just anger, it was something deeper, something raw and vulnerable. Like every wound he'd tried to hide had been ripped open in front of the world. Mendeecees had hit a nerve, said something about his family that Kirk couldn't let slide, and now the fallout was inevitable. Some fans would rally behind him, calling his actions a father's instinct to protect. Others would condemn him, saying no matter what was said, putting his hands on another man was inexcusable. Social media would light up with hashtags, memes, debates that would rage for days, maybe weeks. The set didn't calm down easily. Even after Kirk stormed out, Rashida trailing behind him in tears, the air was still thick with shock. Mendeecees paced back and forth, muttering under his breath, his pride aching more than his cheek. Yandy comforted him, her hand on his shoulder as she whispered, "Don't let him get to you. He's just scared." That's what men do when they don't know how to deal with their fear, they lash out. Mendeecees shook his head, his voice tight. "Scared or not, he better not put his hands on me again, because next time, I won't just stand there and take it." His words hung in the air like a storm cloud, promising that this clash was far from over. The rest of the cast slowly came out of their shock, whispers filling the corners of the set. Some wondered if Kirk and Rashida's marriage could survive this kind of drama, if the trust between families could ever be repaired. Others quietly admitted they had seen it coming, that the tension had been building for weeks, that it was only a matter of time before something snapped. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. This was only the beginning of a feud that would shake the entire group to its core. And as the cameras kept rolling, capturing every fragment of tension, the audience, waiting at home, had no idea that the slap was just the spark to a firestorm that would burn hotter and longer than anyone imagined. Kirk's footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway as he stormed off the set, his anger trailing behind him like smoke from a fire that refused to die down. Rashida chased after him, her heels clicking frantically against the floor, tears still streaking her face as she tried to catch up. "Kirk, wait, please just stop for 1 second, she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. But he didn't stop. He pushed through the double doors, shoving them so hard they slammed against the walls, startling the crew members standing nearby. He was breathing heavy, every muscle in his body wound tight like a spring ready to snap. The anger wasn't just about what had happened, it was about what it meant. About how everything he had been trying to keep under control was slipping right through his fingers in front of everyone. Rashida finally caught up to him outside, grabbing his arm and pulling him to a stop. Her eyes searched his face, desperate to reach the man behind the rage. "What were you thinking? You hit him, Kirk, on camera. Do you realize what you've just done? Do you realize what this is going to look like?" Kirk yanked his arm free, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "I don't care how it looks, Rashida. He disrespected me. He sat there and opened his mouth about things that ain't his business. About our family. About us. You think I'm just gonna sit there and let him? Nah, not me. Not today." His voice boomed in the empty space, and though no cameras were in sight, he still felt the weight of invisible eyes watching him, judging him. Rashida shook her head, her voice trembling. "You crossed a line, Kirk. You don't get it. They're not going to see a man protecting his family. They're going to see a man who lost control. They're going to drag you through the mud. And you know what? Maybe they're right. Because this," she gestured back toward the set, "this wasn't strength. This was weakness." Kirk froze, her words slicing through him sharper than any insult Mendeecees could have thrown. For a moment, his face softened, his eyes flashing with hurt. But just as quickly, the wall went back up, and he barked back, "Weakness? You think me standing up for you and the kids is weakness? You think letting some man talk about us like we ain't got dignity is strength? Nah, Rashida. That's not how I was raised. A man protects his family. A man draws the line. And if I gotta be the bad guy for doing that, so be it." Back inside, the tension was just as thick. Mendeecees sat in a chair with Yandi at his side, his jaw tight as he replayed the slap over and over in his mind. His pride burned hotter than the sting on his cheek. "I'm not letting this slide," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Yandi leaned closer, whispering, "Don't do anything stupid. That's what he wants. He wants to make you lose your cool so he can spin the narrative. Don't give him that satisfaction." But Mendeecees wasn't convinced. His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of cast and crew. "Nah man, he's not about to put his hands on me in front of everybody and think that's the end of it. I don't care if the cameras are rolling or not. If he wants to draw a line, then fine. I'll meet him there." The room buzzed with whispers. Some cast members shook their heads, muttering about how dangerous this was becoming. Others leaned in, unable to tear themselves away from the live drama unfolding right in front of them. Even the crew couldn't help but trade nervous glances, knowing the producers wouldn't dare cut any of this out. They were sitting on footage that would send shockwaves through social media the second it aired. Word spread quickly. Within hours, whispers of the altercation leaked online. Fans flooded Twitter and Instagram, their reactions swinging wildly between outrage and disbelief. "Did Kirk really just slap Mendeecees on camera?" one fan tweeted, while another wrote, "Protecting your family doesn't mean putting your hands on somebody. Kirk messed up big time." On Instagram, comments piled up under the latest posts from both men. Thousands of fans choosing sides, drawing battle lines in a war that had just begun. Some defended Kirk fiercely, claiming his outburst was proof of his loyalty and love. Others dragged him mercilessly, calling him a bully, a coward, a man too insecure to handle words without resorting to violence. Meanwhile, Rashida sat alone in her dressing room, her head in her hands. She could hear the storm outside, producers arguing with crew members, cast whispering about what would happen next, but all she could think about was the look in Kirk's eyes, that raw, broken mix of rage and fear. She had lived with his stubbornness for years, but this was different. This was dangerous. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Please, don't let this be the thing that breaks us." But just then, the door burst open, and Yandi walked in, her voice sharp and full of fury. "You better get your man under control, Rashida, because what he did out there, that was unacceptable." Rashida lifted her head, her eyes red but burning with defiance. "You think I don't know that? You think I wanted this? But don't come in here acting like Mendeecees is innocent in all of this. He had no business talking about my family, about things he knows nothing about." Yandi crossed her arms, her tone cutting. "Talking isn't hitting. Words don't leave marks. You tell me who's really crossing the line here." Rashida stood, her voice shaking but strong. "Don't act like you're above this, Yandi. We all know you live for the drama just as much as anyone else here. You want to paint Kirk as the villain? Fine. But don't stand here and act like your man didn't light the match that started this fire." Yandi's eyes narrowed, the tension between the two women sparking a whole new layer of conflict. "Careful, Rashida, because if Kirk wants to play dirty, I promise you, Mendeecees knows things that can bring everything crashing down." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous, a threat wrapped in a whisper. Rashida's stomach twisted, dread crawling through her veins. What did Mendeecees know? What secrets were they sitting on that could unravel her marriage, her family, her entire life in front of millions of viewers? Suddenly, the slap didn't feel like the worst part anymore. The worst part was what could come next, what truths might be dragged into the light. And while Rashida grappled with that terrifying thought, Kirk was in another room, still pacing like a storm cloud that refused to break. He replayed the moment over and over, each time convincing himself he was right, that no matter what the world said, no man had the right to put his nose in his family business. But deep down, beneath the anger, a flicker of doubt gnawed at him. What if Rashida was right? What if the world didn't see a protector, but a man who had lost control? The stage was set, the battle lines drawn, and everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. This was only the beginning of a war that would tear through friendships, expose secrets, and leave scars no apology could ever heal. The night after the incident felt like a storm no one could escape from. Even though the set had emptied out and the cameras were packed away, Kirk sat alone in his hotel room, the silence gnawing at him louder than any crowd's roar. He replayed the moment again and again, the way his hand struck Mendeecees, the shock on everyone's faces, the sound of Rashida's voice trembling as she begged him to stop. He poured himself a drink, staring into the glass as if it might hold answers, but no matter how many times he turned it over in his mind, one truth kept haunting him. He had let the world see him unravel, and there was no taking it back. Across town, Mendeecees sat with Yandi in their suite, the sting on his cheek fading but the humiliation burning deeper. He wasn't just angry, he was insulted, disrespected in front of an entire cast and crew. He looked at Yandi, his eyes cold with determination. I'm not letting this slide. If Kirk thinks he can put his hands on me and walk away like a hero, he's got another thing coming. Yandi placed her hand on his, her tone calm but edged with steel. Then make sure when you strike back, it's with truth. Hit him where it hurts most, his reputation. Because once the fans turn on him, there's no coming back. Meanwhile, social media was already on fire. Clips from the set had leaked, shaky footage from someone on the crew who couldn't resist sharing the drama. The slap was everywhere on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram Reels. Millions of views piled up within hours. The comments section was a battlefield. Kirk finally showed his true colors, one fan wrote, while another defended him fiercely. He's protecting his family, and I respect that. Mendeecees should have kept his mouth shut. The hashtags, #KirkSlap and #FamilyBusiness trended worldwide, drawing in people who didn't even follow the show. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was a cultural moment. Fans debated in real time, celebrities chimed in with their takes, and the producers, though scrambling behind the scenes, couldn't help but recognize they had struck TV gold. Back on set the next day, the atmosphere was thick with unease. No one knew how to approach Kirk or Mendeecees. Every whisper felt dangerous, every glance loaded with tension. Rashida walked in with her head held high but her eyes weary, the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. She knew everyone was looking at her, waiting to see whether she would stand by her husband or distance herself from him, and the truth was, she didn't know the answer herself. She loved Kirk, but she couldn't ignore what he had done. She found herself replaying Yandi's warning. What did Mendeecees know? What secrets were waiting to explode? The producers called an emergency meeting with the cast, hoping to control the chaos before it spiraled even further. They sat everyone down in a circle, cameras deliberately rolling to capture every flicker of drama. One of the producers cleared his throat, his tone firm but cautious. We need to address what happened yesterday. We can't move forward unless we deal with it head-on. So, Kirk, Mendeecees, this is your chance to speak. The room went silent, all eyes turning to the two men sitting across from each other. Kirk leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his jaw tight. Mendeecees leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice calm but sharp. You disrespected me, Kirk. You put your hands on me in front of everybody. I don't care what your excuse is, that doesn't fly. Ever. Kirk's eyes narrowed, his voice low but heavy with defiance. You came at me about my family. You crossed a line no man should cross. You don't know what I'm dealing with. You don't know what's going on in my house. And you don't get to talk about it like you do. The tension rose again, cast members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Rashida's hand trembled as she placed it on Kirk's arm, her voice breaking. Please, just listen, both of you. This isn't about who's right or wrong anymore. This is about whether any of us can even move forward together. But Mendeecees wasn't finished. He leaned back, his expression darkening as he dropped a bombshell. Oh, I know more than you think, Kirk. You want to talk about family business? You sure you want that door opened? Because once it is, there's no shutting it again. Gasps echoed around the circle, eyes widening as whispers rippled through the cast. Kirk's head snapped toward him, his voice rising. Don't you dare bring that up here. Mendeecees smirked, the power shift palpable. Then keep your hands to yourself, because the next time, I won't be the one embarrassed. You will. The threat hung heavy in the air, more dangerous than any slap. Rashida's stomach dropped, her mind racing. What did Mendeecees know? Was it about Kirk's past mistakes, the ones they had buried deep, or something worse? Something she didn't even see coming. The producers exchanged quick glances, barely able to hide their excitement. They had started the meeting to contain the fire, but now they realized they had gasoline pouring out on live TV. After the meeting broke up, the cast dispersed in small groups, everyone buzzing with speculation. Some rushed to social media, dropping vague posts that only added fuel to the frenzy. Some people don't know when to keep their mouths shut, one cast member tweeted. While another wrote, secrets always find their way to the light. Fans ate it up, dissecting every word, every emoji, desperate to piece together the puzzle. Later that night, Rashida confronted Kirk in private, her voice trembling with both anger and fear. What does he know, Kirk? What is he holding over your head? Kirk avoided her eyes, his silence speaking louder than words. Rashida's chest tightened, the truth she had been afraid to face creeping closer with every heartbeat. You're hiding something from me, aren't you? She whispered. Kirk finally looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt and defiance all at once. Some things ain't meant for the world to know. Even you. Her breath caught in her throat, the walls between them higher than ever. For the first time, she wondered if their marriage could survive, not just the slap, but the secrets threatening to tear them apart. And outside their room, the cameras kept rolling, the world waiting with bated breath for the next explosion. Because if there was one thing certain after that slap, it was this: the drama had only just begun. The tension between Kirk and Mendeecees was no longer just a fight on set, it had turned into a shadow looming over everyone connected to them. The next morning, the production team insisted on filming a group scene at a rented mansion, hoping to capture reconciliation, or at least some kind of dialogue that could keep the show moving. But instead of easing tension, the gathering became a battlefield where everyone's emotions spilled out. Kirk arrived first, his expression guarded, sunglasses hiding the exhaustion in his eyes. Rashida walked beside him, trying to keep her composure, though the heaviness of last night's unanswered questions clung to her every step. When Mendeecees arrived with Yandi, the air shifted instantly, conversations hushed, eyes darted, and the energy in the room thickened. Yandi whispered something in Mendeecees' ear, and he smirked, clearly aware of the power his knowledge gave him. The producers wasted no time, pulling the group together. We need to address what's happening, one of them said firmly, his voice loud enough for the cameras. The fans already know. The footage is out there. This isn't something we can sweep under the rug. Kirk bristled, his jaw tightening. Fans don't know the truth. They only know what y'all showed them. Mendeecees laughed dryly, shaking his head. The truth? You wouldn't know the truth if it stared you in the face. And if you really want me to, Kirk, I'll put it all out there. Every last piece of it. His words cut through the room like glass. Rashida's eyes widened, her heart pounding as she looked between the two men. Stop, please. Just stop this before it goes too far. But Yandi stepped in, her voice sharp, her presence commanding. Too far. He already took it too far when he slapped my husband. Now it's time for accountability. Kirk leaned forward, his voice low but venomous. Accountability. Don't act like your man is some saint. He runs his mouth, stirs the pot, and then hides behind you when it blows up in his face. He had no business speaking on my family. None. Mendeecees shot back without hesitation, his voice rising. And you had no business putting your hands on me. That's the difference between us. Kirk. You fight with fists when you can't handle words. But me, I fight with the truth. And trust me, I got enough truth to bring your whole house crashing down. The cast gasped, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered to each other, others leaned in closer, unwilling to miss a second of what felt like a bomb waiting to detonate. Kirk stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His voice thundered across the room. Say it then. If you've got something to say about me, say it to my face. But if you're gonna keep hiding behind half-threats and smirks, then shut your damn mouth. Rashida's hand flew to her chest, fear washing over her. She knew that if Mendeecees spoke, if he let those words out, nothing would ever be the same again. And then it happened. Mendeecees leaned back, his tone calm but laced with poison. Fine, since you want to play it that way. How about we talk about the woman you've been seeing on the side? How about we talk about the fact that your so-called family man act is nothing but a cover? Should I say her name? Kirk. Or you want me to keep it cute? Gasps erupted. Some cast members covered their mouths. Others stared wide-eyed at Kirk, who stood frozen, his body stiff as stone. Rashida's face went pale, her lips parting as if the air had been stolen from her lungs. What? What is he talking about? Kirk, she whispered, her voice breaking. Kirk's silence spoke louder than words. His eyes darted, his chest heaved, but no denial came. The room buzzed with chaos shouts, gasps, the sound of cameras zooming in to capture every tear, every tremble. Rashida stepped back from him, her heart shattering in real time. Tell me he's lying, she pleaded, her voice shaking. Tell me right now, Kirk. But Kirk stayed silent, his face betraying the truth he wished he could bury. Mendeecees smirked, his victory clear. Yeah, that's what I thought. Rashida broke, tears streamed down her face as she turned away, her hands trembling violently. All this time, you stood there, yelling about protecting your family, protecting me, when you were the one destroying it from the inside. Her voice was raw, each word hitting harder than the last. Kirk reached for her, desperation breaking through his tough exterior. Rashida, please. It's not what it looks like. I swear, it's not what he's making it out to be. But Rashida shook her head, stepping out of his reach. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to spin this. You embarrassed me. You lied to me, and you did it all while pretending to be my protector. The cast watched in stunned silence, the entire room unraveling in front of them. Yandi wrapped her arm around Mendeecees, whispering something in his ear that made him nod, his expression still smug. Kirk's shoulders sagged, the weight of his choices finally crashing down. He knew he was losing everything, not just the respect of the cast, not just the fans, but the one person who had stood by him through everything. Social media exploded again, this time with a whole new storm. Clips of Mendeecees exposing Kirk's alleged affair spread like wildfire, fans dissecting every second of Rashida's heartbreak. Some defended her fiercely, flooding her comments with messages of support. You deserve better. Stay strong, queen. We got you. Others attacked Kirk, calling him a hypocrite, a liar, a man who slapped another to defend a family he wasn't even loyal to. The hashtag shifted. Hashtag Kirk exposed. Hashtag RASHEEDA deserves better. Hashtag truth hurts. Within hours, gossip blogs picked it up, headlines screaming betrayal and scandal. Behind the scenes, Rashida locked herself in her room, refusing to speak to anyone, tears soaking her pillow as the cameras caught every muffled sob. Kirk stood outside the door, his fists clenched, whispering apologies she couldn't hear or wouldn't accept. Mendeecees, meanwhile, felt vindicated, his pride restored. Though Yandi warned him quietly, you lit a fire that won't go out easy. Be ready for the smoke. And she was right, because while Kirk had lost his grip on the narrative, he wasn't the kind of man to bow out quietly. In the shadows of his shame, anger simmered once again, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized the fight wasn't over, not with Mendeecees, not with Yandi, not even with Rashida, because Kirk had secrets of his own, and if Mendeecees wanted a war of truths, Kirk was ready to go scorched earth. The room had not yet recovered from the shock of Kirk's furious outburst when the energy shifted into something far darker, heavier, and unpredictable, as if every buried secret, every whispered rumor, every hidden resentment was about to be dragged into the open under the harsh glow of the studio lights. And while Mendeecees tried to regain his composure after the sting of Kirk's slap, the silence that followed was loaded with tension so thick it felt suffocating, until Rashida stepped forward with tears in her eyes, demanding to know why Kirk would risk everything on camera in front of everyone, her voice trembling with both anger and heartbreak. Because in that moment it wasn't just about a slap. It was about years of mistrust, years of whispers about loyalty and betrayal, years of other people crossing into their business. And suddenly the set turned into a war zone of words, as Jasmine, never one to hold her tongue, shouted across the room that Kirk had finally shown his true self, that the calm and collected image he always portrayed was nothing but a mask hiding rage and control issues. Which only made Kirk explode again, his voice echoing as he accused Jasmine of being the one who fed Mendeecees private details about his marriage, dragging family into mess that was supposed to be handled behind closed doors. And when Mendeecees tried to defend himself, insisting he only wanted to be a friend and supporter to Rashida during her difficult times, Kirk lunged toward him again, restrained only by Stevie J and Yin, who rushed between them before another physical blow could land, and the crew, panicking, didn't know whether to cut the cameras or let the drama unfold, because the producer's eyes were glowing with the realization that this was television gold, even if it was destroying lives in real time. And in the background, whispers spread like wildfire as cast members speculated that maybe this fight wasn't just about one conversation, but about something far deeper. A rumor that Kirk's loyalty had been questioned for months, that Mendeecees had receipts of conversations that could ruin Kirk's image completely, and as the shouting grew louder, Erica Mena screamed for someone to take Rashida out of the room before she broke down completely, because the sight of her husband tearing into her castmates was too much for her to bear. But Rashida refused to leave, standing her ground and confronting Kirk with a trembling voice that cut through the noise, asking him if all of this violence was really about protecting the family or just about protecting his own pride. And fans who later watched the leaked footage were left stunned as Kirk's face twisted with emotion, unable to answer her directly, deflecting instead with accusations that Mendeecees had crossed the line, that no man should involve himself in another man's household. But Mendeecees, red-faced and furious, shot back that the only reason he ever stepped in was because Rashida herself had confided in him about feeling unheard and disrespected, and that revelation landed like a bomb in the room. silencing even Jasmine for a split second before she smirked knowingly, fueling the fire as she taunted Kirk by saying everyone already knew Rashida had been unhappy for a long time. And Kirk's eyes burned with betrayal as he realized how many people had been talking behind his back, weaving narratives about his marriage that he had no control over. And with the cameras still rolling, he pointed at Mendeecees with a shaking hand, his voice cracking as he shouted that no man, no so-called friend, had the right to stand between him and his wife. But Rashida, tears streaming down her face, whispered that maybe if he had listened to her in the first place, no one else would have needed to step in, which sent a ripple of gasps across the set because it was the first time she had openly admitted her unhappiness in front of everyone, confirming the rumors that had been swirling for months. And as Yandi pulled Mendeecees back and Stevie J struggled to calm Kirk down, Jasmine seized the moment to pour gasoline on the flames, claiming that if the truth came out, it wouldn't just be Kirk's temper exposed but his secrets, the ones he thought he had buried years ago. And though she didn't reveal what those secrets were just yet, the mere hint of hidden scandals was enough to send the room spiraling into chaos, with some cast members begging her to stop and others egging her on, desperate to know what she was holding back. And in the middle of it all, Mendeecees, still seething but trying to regain some dignity, demanded that Kirk apologize not for the argument, not even for the accusations, but for raising his hand in front of everyone and turning what should have been a conversation into a public humiliation. And Kirk, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his forehead, refused to back down, muttering that respect had to be earned, not demanded, leaving the room in stunned silence as the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. And what followed was not resolution but a deeper fracture, as alliances shifted on the spot, with Yandi siding with her husband, Stevie torn between loyalty to Kirk and empathy for Rashida, Jasmine fanning the flames with every sly remark, and the rest of the cast whispering among themselves about how this blow-up might be the beginning of the end for Kirk and Rashida's once uncheckable partnership. And fans at home, once the footage leaked, couldn't stop speculating whether this was the moment that broke the family for good, or the kind of public implosion that would force them to confront years of unspoken truths. But on set, in that moment, no one knew what would come next, only that the slap had unleashed a storm that would not die down anytime soon. And as the cameras kept rolling, Kirk's voice thundered once more, raw with both anger and desperation, declaring that no one friend, cast, or even family would ever dictate his household again, leaving the room divided, the future uncertain, and the drama only just beginning to unravel into something far messier than anyone had imagined. The tension only grew heavier after that explosive moment, because while everyone thought Kirk's fury had already reached its peak, the truth was that the slap was just the spark to a firestorm that had been brewing for months, maybe even years. And as the cameras kept rolling, the air was filled with voices clashing over one another, tears mixing with rage, accusations flying faster than anyone could catch. And suddenly what had been a single fight between two men turned into a stage for every cast member to air grievances they had been holding back. And Rashida, her voice breaking, screamed that she was tired of being caught between loyalty to her husband and her own dignity, that she was exhausted from defending him in public, while suffering in silence at home. And when she said those words, the room went silent for a heartbeat before Jasmine, seizing the opportunity, leaned forward with a sly smile and declared that everyone already knew the truth anyway, that Kirk had been hiding more than just his temper, that his family business wasn't just about loyalty but about money, betrayal, and lies. And suddenly, eyes darted across the room because everyone wanted to know what exactly she meant. And Kirk, his face red with fury, barked at her to shut her mouth. But Mendeecees stepped in again, demanding transparency, saying that if Kirk wanted people to stay out of his family business then he needed to stop involving the cast in his charades, which only provoked Kirk to lunge forward once more, restrained again by Stevie J, who shouted at both men to calm down before something truly irreversible happened. And yet nobody could stop the tidal wave of words crashing down as Yandi backed her husband. Rashida defended her pain, Jasmine stirred the pot, Erica cried for order, and the producers whispered frantically to each other about whether to step in or let the footage roll, because this was the kind of raw, messy, unfiltered chaos that reality TV thrived on. And as the hours stretched on, the revelations kept tumbling out about late-night texts, about financial secrets, about whispered affairs, about trust shattered over and over again, until the family that once looked unbreakable now seemed like glass shattering in slow motion. And still Kirk refused to back down, declaring over and over that no one had the right to interfere, while his wife, trembling with both strength and sorrow, countered that maybe interference was the only way the truth would ever come out, and fans who would later see this leaked footage would debate endlessly about who was right, who was wrong, who betrayed whom, and who was only speaking the truth too late. But in that room, under the relentless lights, it felt like the end of something sacred, as though the slap had opened a door that could never be closed again, and the cast, the crew, and even Kirk himself knew deep down that from this moment forward nothing would ever be the same. Because once the secrets spilled, once the alliances shifted, once the voices rose in unison and then collapsed into broken sobs, the damage was permanent. And though apologies might come later, and explanations might soften some blows, the image of Kirk shouting, the sound of that slap, the sight of Rashida's tears, and the defiance in Mendeecees' eyes would forever be etched into the memory of everyone who witnessed it, a turning point in their story, a wound that time might not heal, a spectacle that fans would never stop talking about. And the drama, relentless, refused to end, spinning deeper and deeper until every whispered rumor became fuel for the fire and every relationship in that room was tested to its breaking point, leaving everyone wondering not just about the future of Kirk and Rashida, but about the entire family that had been pulled into a storm they could no longer control. The chaos on set refused to settle, because every second that passed seemed to peel back another layer of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. And while Kirk stood in the center of it all, with his chest heaving and his voice thundering against anyone who dared question him, the ripple effects of that one slap continued to spiral far beyond his control, dragging every single cast member into a storm of confessions and confrontations that felt less like a reality show and more like a battlefield where love, loyalty, and pride clashed in the most brutal way possible. And as Rashida, tears staining her face, shouted that she was done protecting a man who never protected her heart, Jasmine smirked through the commotion and twisted the knife deeper by revealing that Kirk's outburst wasn't just about respect but about fear, because he knew if the truth about his late-night meetings and questionable finances came out, his entire carefully crafted image would crumble in front of the very fans who had once admired his cool demeanor. And that claim lit the room on fire, because suddenly everyone wanted to know what Jasmine was hinting at, what secrets she had been sitting on, and Mendeecees, still furious and humiliated but unwilling to back down, demanded she tell the truth right there on camera, pushing Kirk further into a corner as he roared that no one had the right to bring private matters into the open. Yet Rashida herself, breaking down with exhaustion, whispered that maybe it was time the truth did come out, because she was tired of carrying the weight of his mistakes alone. And when she said those words, the cast collectively gasped, realizing this was no longer a fight about boundaries but an unraveling of an entire marriage in real time. And Erica, her voice shaking, begged them to stop before something was said that could never be taken back. But the dam had already burst, because Jasmine, relishing the spotlight, declared that Kirk had been hiding money from Rashida, that he had been funneling cash into secret accounts and late-night business deals that made no sense. And though Kirk tried to deny it, his stammering tone only fueled suspicion. And Mendeecees leaped on the weakness, shouting that a real man would own up to his actions instead of lashing out at friends, while Yandi clung to his arm, trying to pull him back from another violent clash. And Stevie J, caught between loyalty and disgust, shouted for Kirk to sit down and face the music, but Kirk, veins bulging in his neck, shot back that Stevie had no place lecturing him about loyalty, which only triggered another avalanche of accusations about past betrayals. And the set erupted into overlapping screams, tears, and frantic movement as producers begged the crew to keep rolling because they knew this footage would change everything. And through it all, Rashida collapsed into a chair, clutching her head in her hands, whispering that she couldn't keep doing this, that every time she thought the storm had passed, another wave came crashing down, and the sound of her sobs pierced through the chaos louder than any shout, forcing the room into an uneasy silence for the first time all night. But that silence didn't last long because Mendeecees, his voice low but steady, told Kirk he needed to apologize, not just for the slap, not just for the fight, but for years of dismissing his wife's pain. And when Kirk refused, declaring that no man would ever force him to kneel, Rashida lifted her head and said, in a trembling but firm voice, that maybe it was time she stopped kneeling too. And that revelation hit harder than the slap itself, shocking everyone into stillness as they realized she had just drawn a line that Kirk could not cross back over. And Jasmine, ever the agitator, whispered that this was the end, that Kirk had finally lost the one person who always defended him. And though Kirk tried to speak, the words caught in his throat, his pride clashing with the sudden fear that he had gone too far. And the cast watched in stunned silence as the man who had just commanded the room with rage now stood frozen, his empire of pride crumbling under the weight of his wife's broken voice. And still the cameras rolled, capturing every flicker of emotion, every shift of loyalty, every tear, and every gasp, as the night stretched into a blur of accusations, half-truths, and devastating revelations, until finally, when the shouting dulled into exhausted murmurs, everyone realized that the slap was no longer the headline, because what had unfolded after it was far bigger, far darker, and far more unforgettable than anyone could have scripted. A collapse of trust and a spectacle of raw humanity that left fans reeling, cast members divided, and a family forever changed. The fallout from that night did not fade when the cameras shut off, because if anything, the storm grew fiercer once the cast members left the set and carried the weight of everything said and done into their private spaces. And while Kirk tried to regain some control by storming out with his pride intact, the whispers followed him, the looks of disbelief clung to him, and the slap that had once been just a moment of rage transformed into a symbol of something far deeper, something fans and cast alike could not stop dissecting, because everywhere Rashida turned, there were questions about whether she was finally ready to walk away. And everywhere Mendeecees went, there were murmurs about whether his motives had been pure or whether he had secretly enjoyed watching Kirk unravel in front of the world. And though Yandi tried to shield him from the criticism, even she could not deny that the tension between the men had shifted from a single incident into an all-out feud that threatened to swallow both families whole. And as Jasmine continued to whisper about secret accounts and late-night dealings, producers scrambled to piece together every scrap of footage into a narrative that would shock fans beyond anything they had ever seen before. But behind the scenes the emotions were raw and unfiltered, because Rashida spent nights in tears, questioning how much more she could sacrifice for a marriage that seemed to be built on cracks, while Kirk wrestled with the gnawing reality that his authority had been shattered in public, leaving him looking less like the strong figure he wanted to be and more like a man losing control of everything he held dear. And Mendeecees, though praised by some for standing up to Kirk, found himself caught in a whirlwind of backlash from those who felt he had overstepped, leaving him torn between defending his wife's dignity and respecting another man's household. And the entire cast fractured into camps, some aligning with Rashida and Mendeecees in the name of truth and others rallying behind Kirk out of loyalty or fear, while fans flooded social media with endless debates, clips, and slowed-down replays of the infamous slap, analyzing every word, every glare, every tear, as if decoding a mystery that held the key to understanding where the family would go from here. And yet the deeper the conversations went, the more secrets surfaced, because Erica hinted in a confessional that she knew of other women who had crossed paths with Kirk during late nights. Stevie J admitted he had once warned Kirk that pride would be his downfall, and Yandi confessed privately that she feared her husband's involvement might put their own marriage in jeopardy. And all of these threads wove together into a tapestry of betrayal, loyalty, and survival that stretched far beyond one set, one slap, or one heated exchange, becoming instead a reckoning for everyone involved. A moment where each person had to decide whether to cling to old alliances or break free and tell the truth. And through it all, Rashida remained the heart of the storm, her pain visible in every frame, her strength tested with every question, until finally, she admitted in front of the cameras that she had spent too many years choosing silence over confrontation, that she had sacrificed her peace for the sake of appearances, and that perhaps this explosion was the universe forcing her to reclaim her voice. And those words echoed not just through the cast, but through fans who flooded her with messages of support, hailing her as the woman who finally spoke her truth, while Kirk, simmering with a mix of regret and defiance, tried to spin the narrative into one of protection rather than pride, insisting that his slap had been about boundaries and respect. But deep down he knew, and everyone around him knew, that it was more than that. That it was the breaking point of years of tension, finally unleashed. And as the dust settled, the set remained haunted by the echoes of that night. Because though the cameras moved on to new storylines and fresh drama, the shadow of Kirk's outburst loomed large, reminding everyone that reality TV may thrive on chaos but real lives are left scarred by it. And no matter how many apologies were spoken, how many explanations were given, or how many edits the producers crafted, the truth remained raw and undeniable, that a single moment of rage had unraveled a marriage, divided a caste, and left fans across the world wondering if forgiveness was possible or if this was the end of a family they had followed for years. And as the story stretched on through reunion specials, leaked texts, and emotional confessions, one thing became certain: the slap was not just a scene, it was a turning point that would be remembered long after the lights dimmed, the cameras stopped, and the show moved forward. Because it had exposed not just Kirk's temper but the fragile bonds that held everyone together. Bonds that once broken could never be the same again, leaving behind a legacy of drama so intense, so unforgettable, that it etched itself permanently into the fabric of reality TV history. The tension on set refused to die down even after the explosive moment with Jasmine throwing water at Kirk. And as the cameras kept rolling, every second felt like gasoline being poured over an already raging fire, because Rashida sat in her chair, trembling with a mixture of humiliation, betrayal, and grim satisfaction that Kirk had finally chosen her publicly, while Jasmine paced back and forth like a lioness, ready to pounce, muttering under her breath about how nobody disrespected her and got away with it, the crew whispering nervously to one another, some urging producers to cut the scene while others insisted this was the gold that reality television thrived on. Fans outside the studio banging on the barricades, screaming for answers, with some chanting Rashida's name, like she was a wronged queen, and others chanting Jasmine's name like she was an unapologetic hero of chaos. The social media streams lighting up at such a speed that the show's official accounts couldn't even keep up with the viral clips flooding time, hashtags multiplying by the minute. And in the middle of this circus, Kirk stood frozen, caught in the wreckage of his own decisions, the sound of Jasmine's glass shattering, echoing in his ears as he wondered how the woman he had once pursued was now the very bomb detonating in his life. And Rashida's quiet tears reminded him that the cost of his actions wasn't just public shame but the real fracture of a marriage that had once been the backbone of his entire identity. And yet before anyone could calm the storm, Jasmine suddenly turned back toward Kirk, pointing a shaking finger in his face and shouting, "You think you can humiliate me on national television? You think you can choose her over me after everything we've done behind closed doors?" Sending the set into stunned silence. Because it wasn't just the words, but the implication of even deeper secrets that had not yet come to light. And Rashida's head snapped up like she had been electrocuted, demanding to know what Jasmine meant, screaming at Kirk to answer, while producers leaned in with desperate hand signals to keep the cameras steady because this revelation was more explosive than anything they could have scripted. And Kirk, cornered like a trapped animal, stammered incoherently, denying at first, then breaking down, finally confessing that the affair with Jasmine had lasted far longer than Rashida ever suspected, that it wasn't a one-time mistake but a secret relationship filled with late-night meetings, hidden texts, and moments he had buried in lies, his voice cracking as he admitted it had been going on while he was promising Rashida counseling, promising her change, promising her loyalty. And this confession hit the set like a grenade. Rashida screaming in disbelief, Mendeecees throwing his hands up in disgust, Yandi covering her mouth with shock, and Jasmine smiling wickedly because the truth she had carried all along was finally out in the open. Fans online going absolutely feral, half of them condemning Kirk as the ultimate villain of the franchise and the other half demanding more details of Jasmine's version of events, with gossip blogs already preparing headlines like Kirk's double life exposed and Jasmine drops bombshell that changes everything. The showrunner whispering to assistants about how ratings were about to skyrocket while simultaneously panicking about how to keep the cast from tearing each other apart, and Rashida, clutching her chest, whispered through broken sobs that her entire marriage was built on lies, that every sacrifice she made for Kirk and every moment she forgave him had been for nothing, her devastation filling the air heavier than smoke. And yet Jasmine wasn't finished, because she leaned across the table with venom in her tone and added, "And don't act like you didn't know, Rashida, because deep down you always felt it. You just ignored the signs because you didn't want the world to see your perfect little family crumble." That cruel line slicing through Rashida's defenses like a blade, making her shake with both grief and rage. And Kirk tried to interject, tried to calm the situation, but his words stumbled and failed as Rashida stood up, threw her chair back with a crash, and stormed toward the exit, declaring she was done, not just with Kirk but with the circus of humiliation surrounding them. And the cameras followed her all the way into the hallway where she collapsed against the wall, sobbing uncontrollably, crew members rushing to her side, fans outside screaming louder as word spread through live leaks that Rashida had walked out, the episode spiraling into chaos that no one could contain. Yet inside, Jasmine wasn't finished delivering shocks because she suddenly turned her fire on Mendeecees, snapping that he had no right to lecture her about loyalty when his own past wasn't spotless, pulling skeletons from his history into the open. And the set once again erupted with gasps as Yandi leaped to his defense, shouting that Jasmine was crossing boundaries, that dragging unrelated dirt into the fight only proved she was desperate for attention, the argument spinning like a hurricane with everyone yelling at once. producers screaming into headsets to capture every angle, security on standby in case fists flew again, and Kirk slumping into his seat with his face in his hands, realizing that no matter which side he leaned toward, now he had already lost everything: his wife's trust, his public image, his friendships on set, and even the respect of fans who once rooted for his redemption. And as Rashida's cries echoed faintly from the hallway, Jasmine folded her arms and announced coldly, "This family business is my business now, whether you like it or not," a declaration that left even the hardened producers stunned, because it wasn't just drama anymore, it was war. And the fallout from that war was destined to consume not only Kirk and Rashida but the entire cast, the fans, and the show itself. With alliances breaking, reputations on the line, and no sign of resolution on the horizon, the chaos feeding itself like wildfire and leaving everyone wondering how far Jasmine was willing to go to claim the spotlight, and how much more Rashida could endure before she either shattered completely or rose from the ashes stronger than ever. And with every passing minute the pressure mounted, the cameras rolled, and reality blurred with spectacle, sealing this moment as one of the most unforgettable, scandalous, and devastating chapters in love and hip-hop history. The room pulsed with an electricity that none of them could quite name, as if every word spoken since the party had coiled itself into a knot of unspoken truths, waiting to unravel in the cruelest possible way. And now that knot was fraying. Kirk sat forward, his elbows on his knees, his jaw tense, watching Jasmine pace like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the wooden floor, while Rashida leaned back with her arms folded, a fortress of silence that carried more weight than any outburst could have. And in that silence Kelsey shifted nervously, her voice finally breaking through with a tremor that betrayed the fear bubbling underneath. "We can't keep doing this, not like this, not with everybody looking, whispering, waiting for us to fall apart in public." And her words sliced through the thick air, but instead of easing the tension, they tightened it further, making Jasmine stop mid-step and whip around with fire in her eyes. "Everybody's already talking. Kelsey, don't you get it? They've been talking since the moment I walked into that party. Since the moment your mother glared at me like I didn't belong. Since the moment Kirk couldn't even decide whose side he was on." Her voice cracked between fury and vulnerability, and Kirk winced because there was truth in what she said, truth he didn't know how to confront, while Rashida finally leaned forward, her calm breaking into something sharper. "You want a place in this family? Then stop treating it like a performance. Jasmine, stop acting like love is a role you auditioned for, like loyalty is something you can fake until the cameras cut." And her words landed heavy, dragging an ache into Jasmine's chest that she tried to mask with another sharp retort. "And you think your love is perfect? You think standing there acting like the victim makes you better? At least I fight for what I feel. At least I don't hide behind dignity when the truth is ripping me apart." Her voice rose higher, trembling now, and the sound echoed in the house as though even the walls leaned closer to listen. Mendeecees, who had been silent too long, finally stood, his presence a towering reminder that none of this stayed between them, that every crack in their trust bled into the world outside. "Enough," he said, his voice low but firm, a command that made even Jasmine fall still. "This isn't just about family or love triangles, this is about respect, and right now, none of you are giving it to each other." He swept his gaze across them, lingering on Kirk, who shifted uncomfortably, on Rashida, who held her ground, on Jasmine, whose eyes glistened with unspilled tears, and on Kelsey, who looked ready to disappear. "You think the world doesn't notice? Every time you fight like this, you feed the very people waiting for your downfall. Every headline, every rumor, every so-called friend who smiles in your face but sharpens knives behind your back." And his words carried a weight none of them could ignore, because deep down they all knew he was right. The fight wasn't just theirs anymore. It was entertainment for strangers, fuel for gossip, and each of them had played their part in turning their lives into spectacle. But even as silence followed, it wasn't peace. It was the heavy silence of a storm building, of a truth too big to stay buried. Because Jasmine's voice soon broke again, softer this time but more dangerous. "You all talk about respect. But what about the respect I deserve? What about the nights I've spent proving myself? The times I've swallowed pride just to be seen? The way I've loved with everything only to be told, I'm too much, too loud, too wrong?" She paused, her chest rising and falling as tears threatened to spill. "Maybe I was never supposed to fit here. Maybe that's what you all wanted from the start." And that thought struck Kelsey hardest because she remembered her own doubts, the quiet resentment she carried but never voiced, the fear that Jasmine's presence meant losing her father's attention. And for a moment guilt flashed across her face. But before she could speak, Rashida snapped, "Don't twist this into some martyr story, Jasmine. You don't get to stand here and act like the victim when you've been the one stirring every fire." Her words cut sharp, and Jasmine recoiled but didn't back down, her voice trembling with the weight of every unspoken wound. "I stirred the fire because you lit the match, Rashida, because you never wanted me here, because no matter what I did, it was never enough." Her voice cracked and finally gave way to tears, raw and unguarded. And for the first time Kirk's heart lurched in a way he couldn't ignore, because beneath all the drama, all the accusations, he saw a woman breaking. A woman who had tried too hard to belong and was now shattering under the rejection. And in that moment he realized the lines between love, loyalty, and betrayal were not straight but tangled threads pulling them all toward destruction. Yet none of them seemed willing to cut the thread, to step away before it strangled them all. Instead, they stood there, breathing heavy, drowning in words that could never be unsaid, knowing this wasn't the end, but only another chapter in a storm that refused to pass. A storm that would follow them out of this room, into every public space, every headline, every whispered conversation. Because the truth had already slipped free and there was no taking it back now. The silence that followed Jasmine's breakdown was not the kind of silence that soothed or healed, but the kind that suffocated, stretching longer than any of them could bear. And in that silence Kirk finally dragged a hand over his face, the weight of every choice pressing into him, the memory of every glance, every word spoken in anger, every fragile attempt at reconciliation that had failed before it even began. And he knew, with a clarity that almost burned, that no matter what he said now, it would never be enough to fix the fractures already carved too deep. Yet his voice still rose, low and tired. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to stand in a room where the people I love can't even look at each other without turning it into a war? I'm tired, Jasmine. I'm tired, Rashida. I'm tired of trying to balance a world that keeps tipping no matter what I do." His words trembled under the weight of his exhaustion, and though part of him hoped the honesty might soften them, it only seemed to sharpen the edges, because Rashida's jaw clenched and Jasmine's eyes narrowed, and Kelsey whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to hold both sides when there was never meant to be two." Her voice was small but it carried like thunder through the room, because it wasn't just an observation, it was the truth none of them had wanted to admit, and it stung Kirk deeper than any accusation could, because Kelsey wasn't wrong, and Mendeecees, standing off to the side, gave a slow, knowing shake of his head, as though watching someone finally confront the storm they had been pretending was just rain. And Jasmine, trembling but defiant, stepped forward, her voice breaking but her resolve still iron. "I didn't come into this to steal a place, I didn't come here to break a family, but I won't keep standing here being treated like an outsider when all I ever did was give what I had left." Her words fell heavy, soaked in the ache of someone who had clawed for belonging only to find the door locked at every turn. And for a moment, even Rashida faltered, her eyes softening with something dangerously close to empathy before she blinked it away, hardening again. "Belonging isn't forced, Jasmine, it's earned, and respect isn't demanded. It's given when it's deserved." But her tone wavered, betraying the part of her that remembered her own battles for respect, her own years of proving herself in a world eager to dismiss her. And the contradiction gnawed at her as Jasmine pressed on. "And what have I not done to earn it? I've bent myself, broken myself, swallowed pride until it choked me. And still, I'm standing here being told I'm too much, too wrong, too loud when the truth is, you were never going to see me, not really, because you'd already decided. I didn't belong before I even tried." And the tears that slid down her face now were not manipulative but raw, the kind that demanded to be seen. And Kirk's chest ached with a guilt that had no words, because he had watched it happen, had let it happen, had stood in the middle while two forces tore at each other, convincing himself he was keeping peace when really he was feeding the war. And the weight of that realization bent him forward until his elbows pressed to his knees again, his head sinking into his hands, while the others watched, caught between anger and pity. Kelsey, shaken by Jasmine's rawness, spoke again, her voice steadier this time. "Maybe the problem isn't who belongs. Maybe the problem is that none of us have been honest about what we really want," she said. And for the first time all eyes turned to her, and she felt the heat of their stares but didn't look away. "We keep pretending it's about family, about respect, about loyalty, but really it's about power, about who gets to stand in the center and who gets pushed to the edges. And none of us have been willing to admit that we're fighting for control, not love." Her words were brutal in their clarity, cutting through excuses and defenses alike, and Mendeecees, watching her, nodded slowly as if she had spoken the very thought he had been holding back. "And that's the truth none of you want to face," he added, his voice carrying the calm of someone who had seen too many wars dressed up as family feuds. You want love, but you fight for dominance. You want peace, but you sharpen your words like weapons. You want unity, but you draw lines the moment someone threatens your place. His words dripped with a disappointment that stung because it was deserved. And in the heavy silence that followed, each of them found themselves staring inward, forced to confront the reflection of their own contradictions. But silence was not enough to hold them, and soon Rashida's voice rose again, softer this time but still edged with steel. If this is about power, then I won't pretend anymore. I won't stand here and let you rewrite what this family is supposed to be, Jasmine. And I won't let you drag us through the mud for the sake of a love that was never built to last. And her words hit Jasmine like a strike. But instead of retreating, she stepped closer, her voice trembling but fierce. Then stop pretending you're protecting the family. Rashida, you're protecting your pride, your image, your place. But you're not protecting the people in this room, because if you were, you'd see that all this fighting is tearing us apart more than I ever could. And the truth of that pierced the air, undeniable even to those who wanted to resist it. And Kirk lifted his head, his eyes tired but wet, whispering, "She's right," so low they almost didn't hear him. But the words landed with a weight that shifted the room, because for once, he wasn't hedging, wasn't balancing, wasn't trying to soothe, was admitting what they had all refused to say. And Rashida flinched as though struck, the betrayal cutting deeper because it came from him, while Jasmine's tears doubled, her body shaking as though the validation had been the one thing holding her together, and now that she had it, she was falling apart. And Kelsey, watching her father take a side at last, felt her own world tilt, because for so long she had begged him to stand firm, and now that he had, it was in defense of someone who wasn't her mother. And the fracture inside her widened into something that might never close. The room seemed to pulse with too many emotions colliding, too many truths exposed, and yet still none of them moved, frozen in a storm of their own making, knowing that what had been said could not be unsaid, that the lines drawn tonight would not be erased tomorrow, that from here on out, every glance, every word, every choice would carry the echo of this night, and none of them knew whether they would survive it intact. The air in that room was heavier than any storm they had faced before, thick with betrayal, anger, and the kind of truth that cut deeper than any slap could, and yet no one seemed able to break it, until Mendeecees shifted his weight, his expression unreadable but his tone deliberate as he said, "You all keep acting like this is about loyalty, but let me be real with you. This ain't loyalty, it's pride, it's ego, it's fear dressed up as family values, and I know because I've lived it too. I've seen how pride can turn a brother against a brother, how fear can rip a marriage apart, and I'm telling you right now, if you don't face it, you're not just gonna lose each other, you're gonna lose yourselves." And the bluntness of his words shook Kirk because deep down he knew they were true. But hearing them spoken out loud felt like a judgment he wasn't ready to face, and Rashida's eyes narrowed, her anger reigniting as she shot back, "Don't stand there and act like you know what this family needs. You've got your own mess, Mendeecees, your own shadows. Don't think we forgot." But Mendeecees didn't flinch. Instead, stepping closer, his voice lowering to a calm but piercing tone, "You think calling out my past makes your present less broken. You think throwing my mistakes in my face makes yours disappear. I've done my time. I've owned my dirt, but what about you, Rashida? What about you, Kirk? What about all the things you've swept under the rug and dressed up as sacrifice?" His words landed like blows, not because they were cruel but because they rang with the sting of truth. And Jasmine's lips parted, ready to defend him, but she didn't have to because Kirk's face crumpled, the weight of Mendeecees' challenge tearing into him as he muttered, "I tried, man. I tried to keep it together. I tried to make everybody happy. And all I did was make it worse." His voice cracked with the exhaustion of a man who had spent years wearing masks and was now too tired to keep them on. And for the first time even Rashida's face softened, not in forgiveness but in recognition, because she knew the weight of carrying too much alone, and she hated that part of her still cared, even when she wanted nothing more than to hate him. But Jasmine didn't soften. Instead, stepping forward, her voice trembling with rage and pain. "Tried? You call this trying? You call breaking me down, shutting me out, letting everyone treat me like I'm disposable, trying? You weren't trying, Kirk. You were hiding. Hiding from the truth. Hiding from yourself. Hiding from choosing. And now all of us are paying for it." And her tears spilled again. But this time they weren't pleading, they were scalding. And Kirk's silence was the loudest answer of all, because he had no defense left, no excuse to offer. And the silence only made the fractures grow deeper. Kelsey, who had been holding herself back, finally snapped, her voice sharp and raw, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep sitting here watching all of you tear each other apart and acting like it's normal, like it's family, because it's not, it's poison, and I'm choking on it every day. Her confession stunned the room into another silence, and when she turned, her eyes glistening with a mix of anger and desperation, masking the storm he felt, because he knew that the next words spoken here could either ignite the final explosion or start the slow, torturous path toward healing. Yet Kirk had no defense, no words that could undo the trail of destruction he had left in his wake, and Rashida, finally regaining some of her composure, crossed her arms and tilted her chin upward, her eyes narrowing at both Kirk and Jasmine. Enough of the excuses. Every word you say now, every tear, every apology, it's just another act unless you show us who you really are, who we can trust. Her voice was firm, unrelenting, and even Jasmine paused, the truth of it gnawing at her. Because Rashida was right, everything had been an act. Every effort to be liked, to fit in, to be seen as more than just a disruptor, had been rehearsed and calculated, and now the facade was gone, stripped away by the chaos, leaving raw, bleeding truths in its wake, and Kirk looked between them, his heart heavy with the realization that no matter how he tried to explain, no matter how he begged for forgiveness, the trust that had once been the foundation of every relationship in the room was fractured beyond repair, and the silence that followed his awareness was suffocating, thick with anticipation of what would happen next, because the cameras kept rolling, capturing every tremor of emotion, every flicker of expression, every heartbeat amplified in real time, and Kelsey, now leaning against the doorway where she had initially fled, her arms crossed, watched with the growing sense that she was witnessing the collapse of everything she had ever relied on. And in that moment, the power dynamics shifted subtly but unmistakably, because it was no longer just a battle between adults. It was a war that enveloped every relationship, every secret, every ambition, and the stakes were higher than anyone had yet realized. Jasmine, trembling but resolute, finally took a step back, her voice lowering to a mix of defiance and despair. Maybe none of us are capable of the honesty we demand from each other, she said, and the weight of that truth pressed down on the room like a physical force, making Rashida's arms tremble slightly as if she had been struck, while Kirk's shoulders slumped further under the crushing realization of his failures. And Mendeecees, recognizing the fragile thread holding them all together, finally stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Kirk's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and caution, and he spoke slowly, deliberately. We've all failed, in one way or another, but failing doesn't mean we can't try again. It doesn't mean we can't rebuild if we are willing to face the raw truth, if we're willing to confront the parts of ourselves we've been hiding. And those words hung in the air, heavy but full of possibility, because hope now existed as a fragile, trembling thing, ready to be crushed or nurtured depending on the choices each of them would make next. And Rashida's lips parted, a flicker of doubt crossing her face before she hardened again. And what if the damage is too deep? She asked, her voice quiet but piercing. What if trying again only means hurting each other even more? The question lingered, unanswerable in the moment, yet essential, because it forced Kirk and Jasmine to confront the true weight of their actions. And Jasmine's eyes glistened, the vulnerability she had tried so hard to hide now bare for all to see. And she whispered, "Then we accept it. We accept the pain, the loss, the betrayal, because otherwise, nothing changes. And everything we say about family and loyalty is meaningless." And the rawness of her confession struck the room, leaving every person present breathless, forced to reckon with their own part in the chaos, their own complicity in the breakdown of what had once seemed unshakable. While Kelsey's gaze softened, a glimmer of understanding flashing through her anger, realizing that the adults before her were broken, flawed, desperate for love and validation, and yet still capable of transformation if they dared to try. And the tension in the room began to shift, imperceptibly at first, like a storm cloud breaking. And Kirk, raising his head for the first time in what felt like hours, spoke with a trembling voice. "I don't want to lose you, Rashida. I don't want to lose anyone in this room. I'm willing to face everything, the lies, the mistakes, the chaos, if it means we can try to find a way back." And his words hung in the air, raw and honest, but they were a gamble, because forgiveness could not be demanded. It had to be earned, and the room held its collective breath, waiting to see if those words would ignite reconciliation or shatter what little remained. And Rashida, swallowing hard, finally nodded slightly, a tiny movement that felt monumental, because it was the first crack in her armor, the first hint that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward, while Jasmine, sensing the subtle shift, let a single tear escape, her lips twitching as she fought the urge to collapse into relief, because the war that had consumed them all had left scars. But for the first time in hours, there was a glimmer that those scars could be mended. Slowly, painfully, but they could be, if they were willing to face themselves and each other without pretense. And as the camera rolled, capturing every nuance of emotion, every quiver of the lip, every tremor of the hands, the story unfolded not just as a spectacle for fans but as a raw, unfiltered journey of human complexity, a tale of love, betrayal, pride, and the unyielding desire to belong. And as the crew held their breath, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary, the family, fractured but not yet destroyed, began the slow, tentative process of looking at each other again, measuring the distance, the possibility, the hope, and knowing that the coming days, weeks, and months would be tests of endurance, patience, and truth, but also of resilience and the courage to love even when love seemed impossible. Because the narrative wasn't just about who was right or wrong, who had been betrayed or who had caused pain. It was about the raw, unflinching reality of human relationships, the battles we fight in private and the wars we wage in public, and the way that every choice, every word, every action reverberates far beyond the moment, leaving an echo that shapes lives and hearts long after the cameras stop rolling. And as Kirk, Rashida, Jasmine, Kelsey, and Mendeecees stood in that room, hearts pounding, breaths shallow, tears unshed and shed alike, they realized that the story wasn't over, that the fallout would continue, that the world outside would judge, gossip, analyze, and speculate, but inside, they had glimpsed the truth, and for a fleeting moment, amidst the chaos, the shouting, the tears, the anger, the accusations, and the heartbreak, they found themselves connected by the shared pain and the fragile, desperate hope for a future where love could exist without deception, betrayal, or shame. And though the path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and risks, for the first time in a long time, they dared to believe that, perhaps, through honesty, confrontation, and the willingness to face the darkest parts of themselves, they might survive, might heal, might rebuild not just as a family torn by scandal, but as individuals who understood the depth of their own flaws, the cost of pride, and the transformative power of truth. And as the cameras slowly panned away, capturing the lingering tension and tentative gestures, the audience watching from afar would be left on the edge of their seats, hearts racing, emotions raw, desperate to know what would happen next. Because in a world built on drama, betrayal, and spectacle, the real story wasn't just the slap, the shouting, or the tears. It was the moment when the people involved had to look at themselves and each other and decide whether to fall apart or to rise from the ruins stronger than ever. And that moment, captured in real time, with all its imperfections, its raw emotion, and its undeniable truth, would linger in memory, sparking endless debate, commentary, and speculation, ensuring that the saga of Kirk, Rashida, Jasmine, Kelsey, and Mendeecees would not fade, that it would live on in headlines, social media posts, fan discussions, and private conversations, a testament to the power of human drama and the enduring fascination of watching love, betrayal, and family collide in ways that are as unpredictable as they are devastating. And as the night wore on, and the lights on set dimmed, the echoes of arguments, apologies, confessions, and accusations hung in the air, leaving every soul present forever changed, haunted by the intensity of their shared experience, aware that what had begun as a single explosive incident had evolved into a labyrinth of emotion, power, and consequence, where every decision from here on out would carry the weight of what had been revealed, the scars of what had been inflicted, and the fragile, flickering hope of what might yet be repaired. And in that charged electric space, reality and performance intertwined, leaving nothing untouched, nothing unexamined, and nothing as simple as it had ever seemed before. And so, as the cameras finally cut, the room emptied of its immediate chaos, but left behind a lingering tension that no one could ignore. Fans across the world are still reeling from what they've just witnessed. Emotions ran high, hearts raced, and the comments sections are exploding with speculation, outrage, and awe, because no one expected to see the raw, unfiltered unraveling of a family on the brink. Kirk's outburst, the slap that seemed to shake not just Mendeecees but the very foundation of their relationships, has ignited debates that fans can't stop talking about. Was it justified? Was it reckless? Was it a breaking point long in the making? Everyone has an opinion, and every opinion fuels the fire. Because when emotions this intense collide with fame, the ripple effects don't stay behind closed doors, they reach millions of viewers, each carrying their own judgment and their own need to pick a side. And as the dust settles, the family remains divided, yet somehow still tethered by bonds that are frayed but unbroken, a paradox that makes the drama even more gripping. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will forgiveness come? Will resentments fester? Or will this incident mark the beginning of a complete implosion that no apology can fix? Fans are shocked, hearts are torn, and the tension is palpable even through screens. But this isn't just about who said what, or who hit who, or who feels betrayed. This is about watching humanity at its most exposed, most vulnerable, and most unpredictable. Every tear, every trembling voice, every lingering look captured on camera tells a story that is larger than a single act, larger than one explosive night. It's about pride and love, loyalty and anger, and the messy, unavoidable collision of them all, in real time. And now, as you, the viewer, sit there processing everything you just saw, consider the layers of complexity at play. Every family has its conflicts, every heart its battles, and every relationship its fragile balance. Yet what makes this story so compelling is how it mirrors the universal struggle between truth and facade, confrontation and avoidance, love and self-preservation. This isn't merely entertainment, it's a window into the raw, unfiltered consequences of actions, decisions, and unspoken emotions that so often simmer beneath the surface until they erupt in ways that leave lasting impressions. And here's where you come in. Your voice matters in this conversation just as much as every tear and shout mattered on that set. What do you think will happen next? Who, if anyone, deserves sympathy, and who bears the blame? Could Kirk truly rebuild trust after this explosive confrontation? Or is the damage permanent? Can Jasmine find a place where she is seen, respected, and valued? Or will the fractures in the family continue to widen? Will Rashida ever reconcile her anger with the possibility of forgiveness? Or is the chasm between pride and vulnerability too wide to cross? These are questions that fans are debating endlessly, and your opinion is part of that ongoing conversation. So we want to hear from you. Hit that like button if this drama left you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with every twist and turn in this unfolding saga. And most importantly, comment below with your thoughts. Are you Team Kirk, Team Jasmine, or Team Rashida? Or do you see a side to this story that no one else is talking about? Share your insights, predictions, and reactions, because in a story this explosive, every perspective counts. Your engagement doesn't just support the channel, it becomes part of the narrative itself, helping shape the discourse, drive discussions, and keep the energy alive as this family drama continues to unfold. Fans are shocked, emotions are raw, and the story is far from over. So make your voice heard, participate in the debate, and be part of the journey as we continue to cover every heated argument, every tearful confession, every betrayal, and every potential reconciliation. Stay tuned, stay involved, and keep your eyes on the next chapter, because with stakes this high and emotions this intense, you won't want to miss a single moment of what's coming next. This is more than drama. It's an exploration of loyalty, love, anger, and the human heart exposed. And your voice is part of the story that continues to evolve with every passing hour. So like, subscribe, and comment, because in this saga of power, pride, and family, your thoughts are just as important as the explosive events themselves. Don't let this drama pass you by. Engage, react, and let the conversation rage on.